Uh, Ms. Povey-Dyko, can you take roll?
Devaney,
Here.
Frederick,
Here.
Havels,
Here.
Honig,
Here.
Here. Here, 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 here. Here. Here.
Here.
Full vote tonight.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda. Aye. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is approval of the February 2nd, 2023 regular meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
May I,
Yes.
for the record, it's, what's the date of the minutes?
You make a good point. It says February. Do we have a March meeting? Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So I guess the agenda just has it referenced for the wrong date. And it's actually the March 2nd meeting minutes that need to be approved. Any further discussion?
Oh, thank you, sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the Zoning Board of Appeals report. Commissioner Friedrich?
Madam Chair, we did not meet.
And thank you. And next item on the agenda is communications.
is on the dais along with updated copies for SUP 23-05 staff's report. So it's an updated staff report that we provided to you today.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is SUP 2304.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second to pull up the presentation. The applicant is seeking approval for an adult use marijuana retailer, special use permit 23-04, 317 North Mission. The 2,500 square foot space will occupy a portion of the existing building located at 317 North Mission, where the family video was located. The full structure is currently vacant. The initially proposed hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. Those are the maximum hours of operation for retailers under the established special use permit criteria for the use. These hours may be adjusted as needed within the hours limitations per the zoning ordinance. The applicants represented a business called High Society, which is a cannabis company whose roots were built around the hospitality industry. They have 7 locations in the state of Michigan, which includes retail and cultivation operations. The group tends to develop a relationship with the receiving community, such as through partnerships with soup kitchens, providing financial contributions to the host city, and administrating volunteer programs with their staff. So the property is located within CD-4 General Urban Character District. The surrounding land use is mostly commercial, with a few residential uses on the west of the property within CD3 Suburban Character District. The proposed use would occupy the east portion of the existing building, so the area circulated in red here on the east side, facing Mission Street. But as you can see, currently the building's primary entrance faces the parking lot. So we asked the applicant to provide a door facing Mission Street to bring the building closer to compliance with the zoning ordinance. This will also help increase the amount of glazing in the primary facade that faces Mission Street. And then here, the picture on your left shows how the current property faces an alleyway, which helps separate the residential neighborhood from the commercial establishment. Considering that the proposed use would occupy the portion of the building facing Mission Street, there would be enough buffering from adjacent residential properties to ensure that there would be no adverse impacts. The picture on the right here in the slide shows the current primary facade, which will receive the new primary entrance in compliance with zoning and therefore enhancing the public realm. This picture shows the current conditions of the parking layout markings. And my main concern when checking the site was that the 88 parking spots have a very light marking, so you can't really tell much. So I think it would be good to provide a condition that the applicant should make sure that there are clearly identified markings on the floor and that the parking is compliant with ADA rules. And then I have provided a more detailed staff report, which per our analysis shows that the applicant is able to comply with the general standards for special use permits. I would also note that the applicant was very complete as it relates to having a detailed security plan, odor mitigation plan, and waste management plans, which help determine if the conditions were being met here. Overall, it is expected that property values surrounding the proposed special use could be positively impacted as the marijuana retailer is anticipated to serve as a destination location, increasing the visibility of surrounding businesses. I would also note that it will help trigger full occupancy of the existing building that has been vacant for a while here in Mount Pleasant. Specific standards related to marijuana establishments were also met, except for the condition that the establishment can only operate once the state issues the final license, which is common. That's the order of the procedures. And also the approval would be contingent upon a successful mechanical inspection by the county, which happens after. Regarding the retailer requirements, they were also mostly met. And then the only exception would be that once the applicant submits a signed permit, we just need a sign that would state that the consumption of marijuana products will be prohibited on the premise, and that the applicant will ensure that no consumption of alcohol or tobacco will be allowed on the premises. So all that said, our staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission approves SUP 23-04, subject to the following conditions. The applicant must obtain an adult use marijuana state license from the state and maintain compliance with all applicable state statutes and rules at all times. The applicant shall ensure that accessible parking spaces are compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, comply with the specific special use signage requirements, and post a sign stating the consumption of marijuana products is prohibited on the premises. Last, ensuring that no consumption of alcohol or tobacco be allowed on the premises. And that the county's mechanical inspection approves the building's air handling system and finds it in compliance with section 154.410.b.4, paragraph B, subparagraph 7. And the applicant shall comply with the requirements of public safety and building safety. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for staff?
Looking at the floor plan, if I could ask about loading or unloading and loading from deliveries. Is it all through the one access door?
No, there is an access point, I believe, on the back.
Oh, I see. So the deliveries would come all the way through the unoccupied portion of the building. Is that correct?
Maybe, yeah, maybe once the applicant comes in, he can answer
okay.
that. It's a
Very
good question. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is there I don't know why he's only using half the building. So is there going to be some kind of retaining wall in between the two buildings? And then would another business come into the other side of the building he's not being used?
Yes, so they are proposing to close that portion. I believe that there is no wall there right now, so they will be building that.
And the likelihood of another building, another business coming into that empty space, do we have any idea? I mean, does the landlord have a possibility of trying to rent that other space that's empty?
I didn't speak with the landowner about that, but just from personal experience, we did get a couple of potential clients for other types of uses, and I think the space, the square footage is still quite large. They're not occupying, it's not even half of the space.
Any other questions?
This property had come up before us for a previous proposed business. And at that time, I didn't know, one of the conditions was that there was going to be an enclosed garbage area, like external, because at that point in time, it was just like an open dumpster in the parking lot. And I didn't know the status of if that had been remedied in the meantime.
Gotcha. Yes, this applicant is proposing to enclose the dumpster. Yeah, so that is in the plans. Mhm.
Any other questions? If the applicant would like to come up?
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, thank you very much, members of the Planning Commission. My name is...
This,
Oh, over here, okay, thank you.
Because of the TV.
I didn't want to overtake your space,
No,
so.
no, no.
My name is Andy Andre from MWHS Design, 330 Enterprise Court, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan 48302. I'm here on behalf of the applicant Accelerate Green. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it here today. He's out of town. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the project, a little bit about the company as well. I'm certainly going to hit on a couple of these questions that were brought up during the discussion. As Manuel had mentioned, we are, the company, the applicant is a vertically integrated company. I think that's a good designation to understand within the industry, meaning it has cultivation, processing, and then also retail locations as well. And so it's a company that is self-contained in that. And the most recent location is retail location, adult use, is in the city of Saline. The city has approved the certificate of occupancy, and the BFS and CRA inspections are set up for next week. So moving forward, and this would be in here in Mount Pleasant would be another location we're very excited by. I think she did a great job touching on the project itself, with this being the former Family Video store. We would be taking the eastern portion of it closer to Mission Street. And so as that goes, and you say, well, how do you really define these spaces? And so these are demising malls. We call them demising mall. It's a very common. We did the exact same thing over in Saline in an existing retail space. And so we would construct a wall from the ground all the way up. It provides two separate spaces. When we had the pre-application conference, we went through it with the building official, something he's very comfortable with, and that's what we would do. Again, it's something that's very similar. And I think for this building being vacant for some years, it also then serves, once you get to occupancy and once you get some activity going there, it's also it's a good impetus for getting the rest of the space leased out. Plus, that would leave that entry with what we were doing and working with Manuela. We took that entry and we rotated it around to the Mission Street side. That meets the ordinance, and very frankly, we were talking about it. I wasn't sold on it at first, okay, to be honest with you. Why? Because you like to have that parking, you like to have that access right from your parking lot. But the more we looked at it and we did the building, when we did the building renderings that you see that are up there, it actually makes sense. You know, it's expanding the glazing requirement it's part of the ordinance, as well as it kind of gives a better defined, and also then it kind of gives a little bit more segregation to the space. And you're not asking customers too much to walk an extra 20 feet, you know. So as part of that as well, the improvements that we would be doing on the interior, we also included on the site plan, you can see it, we are including a bike rack as well. That'll be primarily near the entrance, so we'll incorporate that as part of the plan. Then when we also did have the dumpster enclosure. And we provided details on the location on the site plan as well. A couple of things is questions always come up, and I think the staff report does a really good job, but there's always going to be questions. How does traffic work? And is this going to generate more traffic? There's existing curb cuts that are already out onto both streets. And so we already have a very well-defined traffic ingress and egress pattern. And then we have a really nice parking lot size-wise. And I agree and concur that, looking at the condition, I looked at the condition of it today before I came over. I think the parking lot needs to be resealed and then restriped. Other than that, I think it's it'll be in pretty good condition. So from that perspective, it was a former retail location. Obviously, there's retail up and down Mission. We don't anticipate any, traffic that would be out of the ordinary for any other retail space that would go in this building. Noise is always a concern. Deliveries, so we talked about that. How are the deliveries handled? Again, noise this is a retail, and it's, low impact is what I would call retail, because customers in, customers out. In handling the delivery, as part of the application, we had a pretty detailed operation plan. And in that, we would actually be focusing that deliveries coming in that main entrance, going through the check system, going through all the requirements that the state does in the metric system, and then in and out. We anticipate deliveries probably about twice a week, and delivery schedule time is no more than about 15 minutes. So it's not something that's, and it's not a semi-truck, it's anything like this. These are smaller delivery trucks, van style. So nothing crazy or out of the ordinary. And especially when you think about the noise I like the idea of turning and bringing that entry onto the Mission Street side, because you kind of refocused everything over there. So customer traffic and flow and pattern is going to go on the eastern side, further away from the residential, and even with the buffering of the alley. Security is always a question and concern. So obviously not the first location here in Mount Pleasant. You've seen a lot of different things, coming in front of you. It's a very standardized system, but I think we go a little bit up and above standard, CCTV systems, recording. We actually will have app and ability to monitor on our phones, so we can remotely do that. We also do a recording system. We record for about a 30-day period. So if any issues came up, if police said, hey, can we look at that? Absolutely, we can always record it and go back. It's always good having some recent experience. So while we were in Saline and we had all our cameras up, again, another inline type retail space like this, we met the requirement, but we ended up adding 2 more cameras. The low voltage camera guy wasn't happy with me, but that's okay. We got a little bit, what we felt was a little bit of a gap. Could we have passed CRA? Yes, we would have, but it's a little bit more. What's 2 more cameras, right? And so we'll take that same type of approach here. Standardized, like I said, the motion sensors. Everything is badged in and out through fob, and then also panic devices that are located throughout the facility, underneath the cabinets, in strategic locations. And of course, odor. Odor is always a question that comes up. And one of the things that as communities become a little bit more aware, as they move more into the locations, is odor is a concern, but it's manageable, right? And so we put, as part of the operations plan that we put together, we have a very detailed odor mitigation plan. And really it starts with how is the product handled and brought into that. Almost all of it is going to be prepackaged, right? And so at that point, you're not really handling too much on the inside, so it doesn't create this mass odor. It's not a cultivation location where it's going to be open plants and that. So by having prepackaged, by having protocol that goes along with it, one of the things, again, my background's in engineering, and so I get a little geeky when it comes to some of the stuff. So we've designed our mechanical systems to be negative pressure. Meaning, what does that mean exactly? So the spaces where there would be product, we design it so that air doesn't go out of the room, that it actually comes into the room. Okay, would you want to do that? That keeps it from heading out and being able to, escape the building. So you create that negative pressure on that HVAC system, and then we also put scrubbers as part of those units. So we have existing units there. We have a plan next week. We'll get out, do some detailed investigation. We do air balancing. We figure out how the air is flowing through the space, and then we're able to design and make adjustments to the system. So again, we can do it through a design system, multi-tier design system, and also through just a good practice as well. I think she had touched on all of the special land use considerations and how we comply, and we feel very comfortable about that. Some of the conditions, I think, are absolutely, with the signage and different things like that, I think are all absolutely valid. I did want to mention that we did receive on March 20th the retail license from the clerk's office as well, obviously contingent upon moving forward with special land use in that. So with all that being said, we feel very bullish about what's going on in the city, and would love to be a continuing partner in the development and what's going on. So be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Could you speak to what time deliveries generally come?
So deliveries typically are right before opening.
Okay.
And so, and I know within the ordinance, there's a constraint from a certain point at night to a certain point in the morning. I think it's until 7 a.m., right? So and store wouldn't open till 9. So we look at that, about that 8 to 9 period.
Okay, thank you.
I got a quick question. So you don't own the building, you're leasing a portion of the building.
That's correct.
Isn't it unusual not to own a building for a cannabis shop?
Right, so that's a very good question. So no, the answer is it's becoming increasingly more common to see leases go on. So the location that I mentioned in Saline is about a 3,500 square foot. That is a lease as well. And so it's very common now to start to see spaces within lease, especially, and I say this especially when you have open vacant properties. It's we don't need the 8,500 square feet. We need 2,500 square feet. And so open vacant properties like this give us a great opportunity to go in, utilize a portion of it, and spur, possible lease on the other side. So it's very common within the industry.
Okay, so at one time, if a property had a mortgage on it, it couldn't be leased out for this purpose. Has that changed on the federal level, or is it?
No, I think, I believe that's the same. I do believe that because I know those are questions that we've asked in other communities. And they said, typically if there's a bank note on the property, that it's not something that they're looking for. So we've executed a lease with the company. And obviously everything contingent upon moving forward in licensure and approvals and permits and that. So I do believe that policy or some form of that policy is true and in place.
Okay. That's okay. That's enough questions. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'll open up public comment if anyone from the public would like to comment on this. If you could come up to the podium.
So a group of us are here because we live really close to where this would be going in. I live on North Kinney Avenue, 2 blocks from where the family video is.
Can you state your name?
I'm Karen Smith. I've lived here 16 years. My husband's a professor at CMU. We moved here basically for his job, but we've come to really love the city, enjoy a lot of the resources, including the library.
Yes, state your address, just for the
221 North Kinney Avenue. I'm on the corner actually of Chippewa and North Kinney, which Family Video is, if you walk down Chippewa, you run into Family Video 2 blocks from my house. So my main concern is So the neighborhood where we live is quite mixed in that we have old homes, we have fixed up older homes, we have renters, we have people who are older, we have people who are younger, we have kind of a blend of really of backgrounds. And it always feels a little bit on the edge of, stability. I don't know how else to put that because of the age of the neighborhood and the age of the houses and the lack of, I'm in the process of trying to figure out how I'm going to repaint my house because it's expensive. And we want to keep up the neighborhood, we want it to look good, all these things. And that's partly because we're trying to build a community here. I'm a little concerned because it's already difficult to be that close to Mission. We're really close to Pickard, we're really close to Mission, we're really close to Broadway. So we're kind of like surrounded by a lot of retail. And then if you add on top of that, a marijuana shop, there's a reason why they're here getting a special permit. It's not a regular business going in there. And I don't know how many, I was thinking 16 years ago, would I have bought this house if that store would have been there? I probably wouldn't. I probably would have just picked another place because there are lots of areas in Mount Pleasant where you could be away from the retail, kind of secluded in your little enclave. We chose to buy there because we like the house, we like the kind of mixed neighborhood. I know my friends would say the same thing. I don't want to change the flavor of the neighborhood. I don't want to keep people away. I want to make it, continue to be like a place that people feel comfortable and want to raise families and want to have, want to stay in their house. I think everybody wants that, for people to want to stay at their house. You want long-term residents to stay there. So I would just prefer that you didn't give this special permit. It's been empty for a while. We don't love that, but I would prefer an empty building to a place that sells marijuana.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak?
I don't have much to add. So I'm Cal Cotter, and I live at 304 North Kinney, across the road from Karen. I'm a home inspector here in town. We've been at our house like 6 years, not as long as the Smiths. So really, basically, if we have an opportunity to speak out as a public, we want to just come and do that. It seemed, I'm not as educated on the city as all you guys and the businesses that come in and that have been proposed to come in. Seems like 4 or 5 weed stores should be enough for our city, but if we're going to do another one, kind of what Karen said, like we have the campus, we have the casino area, we have kind of the uptown, the downtown, we have the main strip. I found out about this like 3 hours ago, so I don't put a lot of thought on this, but I don't know, turning down my street to a High Times or whatever this is called, I just don't like that idea. And I did notice up there it said, not within a certain footage of K through 12s. Well, like 4 of the families on our streets homeschool. I know that doesn't count in public school, but we are like party central on the street with kids. And I know there's lots of security and different things at these places. And I'm not saying the kids would go there and do anything, but just the feel of it, they could probably put this in somewhere else. That's all we're saying, is to give special permission to do it. And then to have that vacant spot next to it, I don't know, I wouldn't claim to know what kind of business would move in next to a weed store, but I'm guessing it's not going to be like a Christian bookstore. It's going to be more of the same, and it's right there. I know they said an alley separates all of our houses from this, but I don't know. We walked down that alley looking for monarch butterflies. So it's just a lot for us to take in. So I guess just consider that. And my last thought would be, it might raise business values, but it's not going to raise residential values, home values. It's not. It makes me think of like the windmills way out of town. People either don't care or they don't like them. No one loves them. They're not like, I want to live by those. You know what I mean? So it's not going to help us. it's either going to not affect us or it's going to hurt us. So that's just something I would say to keep in mind. But anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Seeing no one in person, is there anyone online?
I don't believe there's anybody online.
Thank you. I will close the public hearing and open up discussion.
I do have a quick technical question. This special use permit, and this seems to be kind of an interesting situation, is it being granted to the person who was leasing the property, or is it being granted to the property owner so he can lease it? You see what I'm saying?
Can I reply?
Well, I see on the application, it says the applicant is Accelerate Green. It's my understanding that's the entity that would be leasing the property. Is that correct?
So it doesn't stick with the property if the lease ends?
It doesn't stick with the property, and if they change location, they have to apply for a new, so it doesn't stick with the business either. It's tied to the address and the business.
Okay.
So if, let's say that they get the SUP, it would be tied to this location as well.
Okay, so if, for the sake of argument, down the road, if this was being leased to a different cannabis business, they would have to reapply?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Any further discussion?
Move to approve SUP 2304, subject to the following conditions. 1, the applicant must obtain an adult use marijuana state license from the state and maintain compliance with all applicable state statutes and rules at all times. 2, the applicant shall ensure that accessible parking spaces are complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Comply with the specific special use signage requirements and post a sign stating the consumption of marijuana products is prohibited on the premises, and ensure that no consumption of alcohol or tobacco will be allowed on the premises. 3, the county's mechanical inspector approves the building's air handling system and finds it in compliance with section 154.410.b.4, paragraph B, subparagraph 7. 4, the applicant shall comply with the requirements of public safety and building safety.
With a second.
Any further discussion?
There's an option for further discussion?
Yes.
Always.
Now that there's a motion,
After the
we can
motion.
discuss it.
I'm going to vote no for this measure. I know that it probably meets all requirements, but I think we're reaching a saturation point, and to the extent that we have any say in that kind of thing, I'd like to begin to say no to these requests, if that's.
So there's no valid reason? Just because you don't like it? That's all.
Yeah, I understand that our role is to say no if something doesn't meet the requirements, and yet that wouldn't come before us if something didn't meet the requirements. So maybe there's a spirit of the law that we take into consideration. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I mean, just for the sake of argument, does anyone who comes up here and I can say, well, I don't think you're going to be able to comply with it, so I'm going to say no. I could do that for every person that comes up here. And we're not here to dictate what kind of businesses come in and come out. We're just here to dictate if they comply with the rules. If they're here to raise the capital and try it out, do it. I understand the oversaturated, but I mean, if it's a restaurant trying to sell liquor and I say, well, you know, I don't drink and I think drinking is a sin, so I'm gonna vote it down. It's my personal belief. It's not the spirit of the law and what we're here to do. So that's all I'm gonna add to that.
Any other discussion? Then I'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No?
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is SUP 2305.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second for the presentation. SUP-23-05, 2023 North Mackenzie, request for a special use permit for short-term rental. So before starting, I was just going to note again that I submitted an updated staff report. There was an error on the previously submitted report regarding my analysis on how the proposed use is able to accommodate parking on the premise. So that's why you saw a new document on your dais. So therefore, I'll just change the slideshow to also talk about the new staff report. So the applicant is seeking approval for short-term rental to utilize the existing residence as an Airbnb, as he's moving out of the city and would like to keep the property instead of selling it. So the existing 1,800 square foot building is currently a 3-bedroom, single-family dwelling. The applicant proposes to rent the space to no more than 6 occupants. The property is located in CD3L, Suburban Large Character District, and the surrounding land use is residential and located within the same zone district. The picture on the left on the slide shows the main facade of the house, which faces the long side of the lot. The garage and driveway can currently accommodate 5 cars. The picture on the right shows the back of the house. There is a tall fence and landscaping separating the premise from the neighboring property. When analyzing how the proposed use complies with general standards applicable to special use permits, we found that it satisfies all conditions. The existing house fits with the surrounding properties as a 1-story single-family residence, and the applicant is not proposing any alterations to the site or to the existing single-family residence, except those that would be required for the rental license to be approved by the fire department. Therefore, this condition is met. Furthermore, there are already 5 homes within 300 feet of the proposed use that carry rental licenses. 4 of them are duplexes, and 1 of them is a single-family residence. Therefore, the proposed use is consistent with the existing character of the area as well. So the applicant does intend to allow guests to utilize the backyard space. However, the existing setback from surrounding residences is approximately 65 and 115 feet, which seems to be sufficient in mitigating any potential noise or odor. As previously mentioned, there seems to be sufficient space for parking on the premise. So overall, short-term rental use is not expected to injure the financial value of the surrounding properties, as it is consistent with the existing context. As I mentioned, there are several rentals already in the area. And when looking through specific standards for short-term rentals, the applicant also seems to satisfy most of them. I'll just point out, though, that the lot where the house is located doesn't comply with the minimum lot width for the zoning district because it's CD3L, so we require at least 90 feet. And the property measures 51 in width approximately. And that's because on corner lots, by the zoning definitions, we have to measure the width based on the short side of the block as opposed to the short side of the lot as opposed to the long portion of the lot. So because of that, we do have a condition that states that the planning commission may determine if the short-term rental is suitable in this location or not, since it's a non-conforming lot. So we already talked about parking, so I can jump to the next slide as all of these conditions here are met. And then in this slide, the only condition here is that the applicant does not currently have a rental license. So in order to be able to successfully secure one, that would be a condition of approval. And the applicant wouldn't obviously be able to open Airbnb without getting the rental license first and all the work done as per the fire department site visit. So last, the applicant should just be aware also that any structural expansion of the dwelling that increases the square footage of the dwelling, including the addition of new decks and patios, and any alteration of the interior of the dwelling in a manner that results in an increased number of sleeping rooms, would require the applicant to come back for a new special use permit. So, that said, I was just gonna mention that you also saw in your dais that there was a letter in opposition for this SUP 23-05. And then the staff recommendation is to approve SUP 23-05, subject to the following condition. The applicant shall comply with the requirements of public safety and get approval for a rental license with the Mount Pleasant Fire Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
3 questions, I'm not sure if you can answer them or not. Number 1, are rentals existing? Do they have a year lease? I don't know what short-term means.
So the definition of short-term in the zoning ordinance is up to 28 days. However, they do need to get a rental license with the fire department, so that once they get that, they can operate the Airbnb, but at the same time, they can also rent as a long-term rental. So it's kind of moot, but they, if they get the SUP, they can do short-term, and with the rental license, they can do long-term as well.
Okay, so I guess is it unfair then to compare this again with other rentals that are around them? Are the rentals that are around them, again, more long-term leasing tenants? Or are they in and out like this proposed situation might be?
From what I'm aware, they are long-term rentals. I think the only way for us to know if we do have other Airbnbs is to look at Airbnb. There may be a situation that people are operating irregularly, but not to my awareness. So, yeah.
Okay. Other 2 questions you probably can't answer. So every day, again, there could be a new person living in that house then, if they rent as more of an Airbnb than a rental, where you have the consistency of people living there, correct?
The consistent could be different than surrounding
So
properties.
it can be people in and out, moving in and out, and
Yeah.
so forth in that house. Tremendous, okay. Does the applicant, again, conduct background checks on the people that are renting this facility? Like, if you have a long-term rental, again, that's nearby, and I'm a property owner, and I now have the chance of having people in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, are the background checks on those people? If they have a longer-term lease, usually that landlord, again, will do a background check on this person. So is there any kind of credibility or anything to protect the residents who own houses there?
The only thing I can say about that is that we can revoke the SUP if we find that the occupants from the Airbnb, whoever those are, over time, if that becomes an issue, if they generate noise, if they're disturbing the neighborhood, we have the option to revoke the SUP right away.
Any other questions for staff? The applicant would like to come up? If they are here? Are they appearing by Zoom?
No, there's no one else on Zoom.
Okay, I will open up the public hearing. If anyone from the public would like to comment, they can come up to the podium.
I had one question, just because our children are here and every moment's a teaching and learning moment. So this is a planning commission, right? You guys do have a say on what types of businesses come here, don't you? Or if they meet these requirements, you don't have a say. So any type of business could move in anywhere. So what do you do? Like, what do you guys do? Make sure they meet this list? Okay. Because I thought, and this is the first time I've crashed one of these meetings. I thought you guys planned out the direction that the city was moving, so you guys could even be surprised at some of the businesses that are coming in. You just have to take the list, and if they meet the requirements, you can't say no just because you don't want it to, or you can't do that. No, okay. All right, now we know. Thanks. So you knew he was getting approved before you got here. You just had to get the list done, essentially. Is that true?
I don't know
Why
why
do
he,
you go to the public? Like, why do you want our opinions? You don't know? Okay.
Anyone else from the public want to comment on this special use permit application? Seeing no one in person, I guess we should double check to make sure there's no online comments.
There's no one on Zoom.
Thank you. I will close public comment and open up discussion.
But I guess I could add to the, there was the question about short-term of like kind of in the style of rentals with Airbnb are typically more of like a short vacation stay. And so people aren't typically background checked with those stays, but they do have the ability of like the renter gives a review of who stays with them with each stay. And so there is kind of, and the renters, those that stay there have the ability to give a review of that property. So it kind of provides a check and balance of if they have someone that's planning to stay that has had a previous stay, that they can be denied. They can, the person that owns the property can say, no, thank you. Looks like you've had a few bad stays. And they can have that check and balance of, while it's not a formal background check, there is that kind of a check and balance.
Does this negatively impact the resale value or the property owners again to have an Airbnb with people in and out compared to, I mean, if they bought a house, they thought they'd have permanent residents around them. So does it hurt their house? I mean, again, because they're gonna have people in and out, if they have kids at all, would they want that in their backyard? And one family said no, so I didn't know, again, if that's gonna hurt them. And isn't part of the criteria we have to look at, does it cause harm again to the neighbors who are already there? And if we want permanent people again to live in Mount Pleasant, does that hurt people who want to live permanently?
I mean, this is also Mount Pleasant. It's not Ann Arbor or Lansing or anything like that. I don't think there's gonna be people here every weekend in this Airbnb going in and out, in and out, in and out.
Where I see Airbnbs tending to be most controversial in Michigan tends to be places that have basically where people try to put a cap on them because it's a really high number. So Marquette, Traverse City, Petoskey, some of those places that are incredibly tourism oriented in a small confined space, that's where that tends to be more of an issue, in part because sometimes the Airbnbs can be more profitable. People are worried about the property values going up a bit too fast for pricing, working class families out of different neighborhoods in Marquette or Traverse City. So if anything, some of that can be the opposite, where it's because the Airbnbs in those places can be, profitable, booked, for really good money all summer long, sometimes all year long. Where it seems here, with talking with Jacob Kane, former planner several years ago, back at the time that he looked at the Airbnbs that were in the city, because it turned out somewhere here without getting permits, the pattern of occupancy is much more spotty around, like commencement weekend and different weekends here and there, special events. And so it's a much different pattern of Airbnb usage or VRBOs, other kinds of webs, apps and sites like this, than there might be in a very tourism-oriented city, say right on the shoreline in the Great Lakes. That'll affect the property values differently.
I'm going to add on to what you referenced about part of that discussion back when we were addressing a handful of operating Airbnbs before we knew that they were in operation. And so bringing them into compliance, and when they came in and shared about traditionally who was staying with them, it was traditionally families that were renting those Airbnbs because they were choosing, because they one family was sharing that they prefer to have a home to rent than a hotel room when they stay in, because of they have a child with special needs, and so it allowed them a bit more ease of being able to have a kitchen to customize meals that they needed, and things like that. And so and that was something that came up with a couple of them, that they said that they primarily they found that their clientele were families that rented the Airbnbs for the short stays. So in that view, I mean, it kind of fits with the neighborhood anyway. I mean, if you're looking at families looking to have families around them, I mean, that's primarily what they would find their clientele were.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or motion?
Move to approve SUP 2305, subject to the following condition. The applicant shall comply with the requirements of public safety and get approval for a rental license with the Mount Pleasant Fire Department.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is just general public comment. If anyone from the public would like to comment on anything at this time, you may come up to the podium and do so. Is there anyone online that would like to comment?
Nobody's online on Zoom.
Thank you. I'll close public comment, and next item on the agenda. I don't see anything else on the agenda. Is there a staff report for today?
No.
No? Okay, if there's a motion to adjourn. Oh, sure. Oh.
Move to approve. I'll-
So that's a motion to approve the work session minutes from March.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on those minutes? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting adjourned to work session. I don't know if anyone needs a break or not, or do you want to just proceed to work session? Okay, now starting the work session.
All right, so today I would like to provide the Planning Commission with a summary about zoning for economic opportunity. This was the previously identified item to be discussed in 2023, which was selected as the first priority by the Commission. This was in the work session in March that you just approved the minutes. So to talk a little bit about zoning for economic opportunity, the idea is that it aimed to identify and address zoning barriers to encourage development and redevelopment of underutilized buildings and lots, attract new businesses and more easily enable business expansion, and encourage a great variety and a greater mix of uses according to our master plan. So the idea was to start an outreach process and compile a list of zoning issues that stakeholders have faced when trying to develop in the city, and then assess what could be potentially modified in a way that it balances the goals in the master plan and the zoning ordinance with existing development patterns. We found that there's some disconnection in instances between those two, the regulatory and what you see on the ground. So ultimately, is really the goal here is to continue to attract and encourage more private investment in the city. So the memo that I sent to the Planning Commission, you can find the summary of the feedback that I received by over 20 participants that I engaged since in the beginning of the year. Those individuals, they represent a wide range of stakeholders, from governmental and nonprofit organizations to the technical community, lenders, brokers, and property owners. So I don't know if you want me to give the overview, but maybe for the record, there were 3 main categories of items that more directly relate to zoning and planning. There are some recommendations that came more for the city internally, so we can better our procedures internally. But here I'm bringing the items that are more related to the Planning Commission. So for policy, we got stakeholders talking about how the city's master plan is really too far looking. So there was a need to take a look at the next 10 years and see what the goals could be, right? And how can we draft a plan that it's more tangible in that manner? They also talked about process enhancement regarding how we handle special use permits and things of the like. So I think the goal here is to try to reduce the amount of applications that need to come to the planning commission. So if there are types of uses that the master plan already laid out as uses that we want to see, like middle housing types and things of that nature, the idea would be to discuss if we still need a special use permit, or if maybe we can take a look at some of those and make them allowed as of right. Of course, site plans will still need to come to the staff for review and all of that, but that's another item that was brought up. And also one participant recommended that we should take a look at a mechanism that could allow projects to slightly deviate from the zoning ordinance in certain instances, depending on the use. But we can talk about other ways to do that. And in the zoning ordinance, we had a couple of rules that kind of touch upon use regulations, bulk regulations, design. One of them was regarding district designations. So the idea was that I think this can be more of an educational exercise, just to explain how the city welcomes rezoning applications from anybody. But the idea was that the applicant or stakeholders felt that there should be more latitude for property owners to propose changes to the zoning map. And then also there was a little bit of a conversation about taking a look at Isabella Road, where our boundary is very spotty with the Union Township, but treated more as a corridor, and a corridor that has a more, I guess, more similar types of uses along the corridor, as opposed to now we have residential, industrial, it's kind of spotted when you come down. Isabella?
Can I ask a question about that one?
Yeah. Mhm.
So are you talking about coordinating with the township?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. And use regulations, I think the whole idea is to enable for more mix of uses. That's in our master plan, and that's something that stakeholders talked about as well. In some instances, they felt that we just need to take a look at subdivisions. Sometimes you may have one parcel that applicants would like to have several types of uses in one parcel. So they just wanted us to discuss that and how that relates to tax parcels and subdivisions for tax purposes. They also suggested that we take a look at flexibility with rules that regulate open uses. That's more like beer garden kind of establishments, especially downtown, but also wholesale establishments and the whole, I guess, how retail and wholesale could be more seamlessly treated. Home occupation requirements, I had mentioned that before and it was in our list. And then look at the definition of dwelling, a family, and allow for more mix of types of units. And the last one was about non-conforming uses and how we allow them to be enlarged or reconstructed in certain instances. Bulk regulations, as you may imagine, we heard a lot about commercial CD5 districts. So in CD5, we do have requirements that buildings have to be at the street line, right? So that has created issues, especially for gas stations, strip malls, drive-through establishments. They also recommended that we should deviate from regulating how the interior spaces of buildings are designed. So things like minimum ceiling heights have been a little bit problematic. And then I would say that also the design, some of the design parameters that we have, so the amount of building that you may have on the lot frontage, I think some of those require a pretty large footprint that can add to cost and not match some of the lots that we have and uses that are being proposed. And then site design and amenities, I think there was a conversation about just taking a look at bicycle parking, especially industrial zones. They seem to be a little bit too burdensome. And then signage regulations regarding the area that you can use for signage. And then also take a look at subdivisions to allow the construction of smaller single-family residences is something that was brought up as well. So anyhow, there's a lot here. So based on the summary of findings and our previous work plan discussion last month, I prepared a draft schedule for 2 years because there's a lot here. Obviously, it's not that we are taking action with all these items, but they're just items that we would discuss further in the future. So I basically at this time, I'm asking the Planning Commission to approve the draft schedule. And of course, if you have any recommendations on shifting things, maybe shifting priorities, I would love to hear those at this time. And just a note that the schedule is subject to adjustment based on submittal volume in case we get too many applications, and then staff capacity and emergence of issues for discussion as well that may occur in the next 2 years. So yeah, let me know if there are any questions, discussions.
The schedule that you have here, have you essentially just grouped everything based on the order of the different policy, process enhancement, zoning ordinance? Did you just kind of go in order, or did you, like, does it reflect a different grouping? I'm just kind of curious about how the grouping.
Yeah, it does reflect a little bit of a different grouping. I think the main exercise that I went through was to create buckets that had similar items. So I like to discuss like use regulations in one bucket, but then also split commercial versus residential. So that was one exercise. The other one was to just bring the priority list that the Planning Commission had recommended last month, and then put the items that were in your initial list up front. But then the items that were in the zoning for economic opportunity became a priority over the items that were not part of zoning for economic opportunity. One of them is the discussion around energy, so solar PVs and then EV charging stations. So that was not brought up during my interviews, during the outreach process. So that kind of went to the more towards the end of the schedule. So just a note on that.
I think this sounds like a good list. And the people that you talked to clearly had some very concrete suggestions for us to go over to. So I think it looks great.
Do you need us to do motion?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Mhm.
Okay.
Move to approve the draft schedule for work sessions for the years 2023 and 2024.
Second.
Any discussion?
Move third.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further for the work session?
No, that was it today.
Okay.
Move to adjourn the work session then.
Second.
Third.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Meeting adjourned.